This is what happens when you're locked down too long. You start buying little critters. You know, my dogs love to play with this kitten. I wasn't sure about kittens, but hey, isn't she cute? Anyway, you stay there. I want you to listen. All right, we're gonna couple announcements before we move on. First announcement is going to be your assignment. What I want you to do, watch the little guy. Hey, is by Friday. Again, three things that I want you to look up and have an understanding, because as we start to move into our next lectures, I kind of want you to have an understanding of three things. The first is IAFIS. We call it AFIS. Basically, it's it's an integrated automated fingerprint index system. It's where we put everybody's fingerprint systems. Look up that on the website. That I want you to look at CODIST, which is Combined DNA Index. And then look up the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. So three things I want you to look up. Send me a document, basically, that you understand what each one of these entities do. So an understanding of this is what AFIS does, this is what CODIS does. And then send that to me and I'll put that on. The next announcement is the fact that we have a test coming up. Many of you, I know that the syllabus said that it was going to be today. Relax. I'm going to put the test up, and it'll be online Friday, and I'm going to have it there all weekend, including the extra day Monday. So you won't have to worry about, jumping right at it. You have a long weekend, but remember, Tuesday morning, the test will be gone. If you don't take it by Tuesday morning, you're not going to have that opportunity. Again, obviously, you're going to be using your notes. Friday, I'll give a quick lecture, basically a review of kind of what to expect on the test and what not to expect. So the Friday video lecture that I'll do will be kind of a review. What I would like you to do in the meantime is, if you have questions about the test, things, a lot of it, things that you might find in the book that we didn't talk about, send me that question. And say, are we going to have this on the test? So a lot of students are good about asking questions, trying for me to clarify something we talked about, but where they lack that understanding is ask me questions about what we haven't talked about, and I'll let you know whether or not that's going to be on the test. So we'll do that Friday. So again, you got an assignment Friday, and I'm going to be putting test number 1, chapters 1 through 3, up on Friday, and you'll have it all weekend in order to do. Let's go ahead and finish up on chapters 2 and 3. Keep in mind, as we get into what most people say is the boring part of being a detective, is clearly writing a document might not be fun, but it's 25% of what you do as an investigator. And it's clearly your reputation on the line. The district attorney and all the deputies that work for that department are going to be seeing the things that you document and whether you're going to be difficult to work with. Your cases are going to be tough to prosecute. I mean, they're going to know you based on what you write and what you give to them to prosecute. So, again, this is going back to day one when I said you have to be good at tedious tasks. One of those tasks is documenting. It's really important. So let's move forward. We're going to talk about a crime scene. Unfortunately, when we have face-to-face class, I like to put a crime scene together. I have a bunch of mannequins, give you an idea what to expect at a crime scene. We don't really have that, so I'm going to do my best to try and explain to you what do we do at a crime scene. And I'm going to do it in a way that we start from the very beginning and work through the end. So let's talk about the approach. When you're called to a crime scene, you're going to be approaching a crime scene, and these are the things that I want you to be concerned about. Certainly when you approach the crime scene, be alert, not only for your safety, and again, it depends on what type of crime you're responding to. In many cases, the suspect might still be at large, so safety is extremely important. Always remember that. Number one, I want you to be safe, and number two, make sure you give any kind of attention to any kind of victims that are there on the scene. Who's in charge when you first approach? That gets asked of me all the time. Most departments have in their policy that the first police officer responding to a crime scene is the officer in charge until they are relieved. So in most cases, as a detective, you're going to be responding to a call where a police officer has already arrived. That police officer, it doesn't matter what rank they are, first officer that arrives on the scene, the first responding officer, is in charge of that crime scene. For those of you going on to this career, you're going to be taught that this is paramount, that you will make sure that that crime scene is safe if you're the first person there, and do whatever you can to make sure that that crime scene is safe as you approach that crime scene. You're going to put tape up. You know, we've seen it all over the TV shows. You know, you got crime scene tape up. Don't worry about whether or not the crime scene tape is in the exact spot. Put it up the best that you can. As a detective, when you arrive, if you think it needs to expand, many times I've arrived on a crime scene where I'm looking at it and thinking we need to expand because there could be evidence outside of that tape. So we just take down the inner perimeter tape and we put it out and make it bigger. Not a big deal. But remember, safety is what I really want you to be concerned about before we even worry about prosecuting. Medical attention. Give medical attention to anyone that's needed. And then as you respond to that crime scene, and this is where a lot of new detectives make mistakes. Remember, as you approach that crime scene, you're going to have a lot of bystanders out there. A lot of people are gathering on the street whenever a crime occurs. These are potential witnesses. I want you from square one, the minute you get out of your car, to be looking at everybody there as potential witnesses. I want the first officer there on the scene. Once you get there, you can relieve them of that crime scene. Now you're in charge of the crime scene, but have them stay. And now they start talking to people and start asking everybody there, did you see something? Did you hear something? Everybody there could be a potential witness, and if you lose them and they leave, you might not ever have them. So I want you to be canvassing that area for any potential witnesses. At this point, depending on what type of call you have, you know, many calls that are violent in nature, you might have a suspect that's still at large. And we know, based on all of the crime scenes that we've had, that first hour that you're there is extremely important in trying to apprehend sometimes some of these suspects. So apprehending suspects, you know, a term that we use and you'll hear me say all the time, and it might be on the test, is ATL. That's attempt to locate. Attempt to locate. What you're going to be doing is, after you have, you're having somebody look for any potential witnesses, if you have a suspect and suspect description, an attempt to locate is where you broadcast that out over the airwaves on police radios. What you're going to be doing is immediately broadcasting this crime just occurred, and this is the suspect description. That gives all of the police officers driving in that area, you know, and we'll talk about this, it's refreshing your memory from 1010, that reasonable suspicion to stop anybody that matches that description. I mean, if you have a good suspect description, somebody's wearing a bright orange jacket with a blue and black baseball cap, and they've got a beard and a mustache, you know, and you've got a great description, I expect anybody within a close proximity of that crime scene to be stopped. And ATL is extremely important. Make sure you get that out. Many cases, you might not have that, especially if you don't have or you haven't identified any witnesses at this point, and maybe the victim is unconscious. So remember, broadcast the alarm. That could be extremely important. At this point, I want you to then stand back and look at what you've got. Don't rush in. For those of you that are really interested in this, pull up the Kurt Cobain crime scene, and you'll see when you pull up, because there's so many documentaries on that, and you'll watch all of these detectives come into that crime scene, and they're contaminating it. They're just not paying attention. Before you rush in and use inductive reasoning or deductive reasoning, I want you to stand back and just take everything in. Look at what you've got here. Decide whether or not you should expand the crime scene. Put the tape out further. If a crime occurred on campus at SUU, I'm not going to put crime tape just around one of the rooms where the crime occurred. The entire building will have crime scene tape around the building. And that was one of the big mistakes in the Kurt Cobain crime scene. They went right up to the room where this suicide happened, and they didn't put crime tape around the house or around the neighborhood where we had a lot of potential suspect information. So again, look at the crime scene and decide whether or not you need to expand it. And at this moment, and this is extremely important, I want you to start taking a chronological log. You're going to be taking field notes. You're going to be writing things down all the time. Right now, I want you to do a chronological log. You're going to write, I arrived on this crime scene at 10:22 hours. At 10:24 hours, I asked first officer on the scene to do this. At 10:30 hours, I did this. Chronological order. If you did an ATL, I had dispatch broadcast an ATL at 10:45 hours. When you go to court, it's extremely important to have that chronological line of events of what did you do at this point. Many times you'll have medical there. So you'll be stating at 10:35 hours, FD Rescue Unit 53 was there assisting the victim. You know, have everything in chronological order. Once you've started documenting, now we're going to do a crime report. You're going to hear me talk about a crime report many times throughout this class. A crime report is the initial report that's documented. Usually the first officer on the scene will start this report and then hand it off to the detective. We do a crime report for every event that occurs within your jurisdiction, every event. It'll be categorized on your report by what we call an event number. An event number or a case number. Depends on your department. An event number or a case number. The minute you are dispatched to that event, most event numbers or case numbers, when you do this crime report, everything you do from the moment that you've been dispatched till the time you prosecute and you arrest will be documented under a number, a case number. The way we generate that case number is based on if something happened right now, it's chronological what comes into dispatch. So if something was to happen right now, we start with the year, which is 20. We start with the month. What's today? Today is the 20th. This is kind of fun. So you would do 20:05, 20 dash. Very first call that comes in at midnight would be 0001. So now it's 7 o'clock in the morning. Let's say that we've had 150 calls come in. So it would be 0150. So the event number for this case would be the year, month, and day, and that's sequentially. This was the 150th call that came into dispatch. Everything that you will do on that crime scene will be attached to that case number. When the prosecutor gets it, and ultimately it might be 6 months later, everything will be under that event number. When we go to the crime scene and we start gathering all of the evidence, even if we have a body that's there and it goes on and the coroner does an autopsy, the autopsy will be done under that event number. When the prosecution goes to prosecute this case and they need to find every document attached to that crime scene, everything will be under that case number. So remember, every piece of paper that you do and document when you enter that crime scene, including your field notes. Remember, you're just scratching stuff down on a piece of paper. Every piece of paper you have will have an event number at the top of the page. That's going to be a test question. I want everything that you document to have the event number on the top of that page. Very important. When you do this crime report, you're going to be documenting certain things that we must have, including on this report. Remember, we're trying to transmit modes of operation, modus operandi. So you're going to have anything to do with that case that's talking about the details of that crime, the narrative of that crime. And inside of that crime report, these are the things that I want you to have. We'll go over them specifically right now because it must be in it. And every police department, they've got a specific crime report and they'll have this information. Number one, I want victim information right at the very top. You're going to have you're going to have the event number, you're going to have the type of crime that you suspect, and then right after that, you're going to have victim information. I want to know where it took place. I want to know the time of the occurrence. I want to know who reported it to the police. When we talk about reporting things to the police, this is another thing that's extremely important because you're going to hear this in court 1,000 times. And it gets very confusing if you don't understand what these terms are. We call it a PR. or in Utah they do it backwards, RP. Person reporting, reporting person. So if I'm talking in court, they're going to ask me, who is the PR? That was the person that dialed 911 and reported this to the police. I want that information on the crime report. So on the crime report, I want to know who the PR is. I want to know any witnesses that we've been able to locate on that crime report. If you have an arrestee or suspect information, that's on the crime report. If you're lucky enough to make an arrest, that will be on the crime report. Many crime reports will not have arrest information because we do them that night. We do it right then as the crime had occurred. It's, unusual to have somebody arrested right then. In many cases with domestic violence, yes, we'll have an arrest made right then. So you'll have the arrestee information. Suspect information is on there. And then the most important thing is I want your name on that document. So you've given me all this information. You've got the event number. You've got a lot of information here. I also want to know who is giving me this information. I will tell you this. This is one of those tips from the field, having worked for many, many years in this field. There's nothing more embarrassing than coming to work the next day and having mistakes on your crime report and having a sergeant hand it back to you and say, fix it. It's one thing to turn a shitty assignment into a professor at a college. Whole nother thing when you got a briefing room full of police officers and you're handed back a document like you're in middle school and told, I can't read this. Do it again. I don't understand what you're writing here. Do it again. Or more important, when you do those, you're going to be handing out statements to witnesses. If somebody's seen something, they heard something, they're going to be writing it down. If we cannot read what they wrote, it's your job to be taking that document back from these witnesses when they write it out and looking, can a courtroom, can a jury read this? And important on this is, did they sign it and is there contact information? I want to know who wrote this. If somebody saw someone shoot someone, that's pretty important going to court. I want to know who is this, how can I contact them, address, phone number, and did they sign it, and can I read this? Extremely important. Don't be embarrassed when a sergeant hands you back and said, I don't know who this is, I can't read it, go and get it done again. Now you're going to go try and find this person and have them rewrite something when you should have done it right the first time. And I shouldn't have to mention, because I've watched this many times, don't let somebody walk back if they say, I've got a pen, when you're saying, hey, can you write down what you saw? And now it comes back and it's written in bright pink or bright yellow. Can't have that. If they come back, always carry 2 or 3 pens. Hand them a pen, blue or black ink. Enough said on that. Field notes. Remember, if you're taking field notes, that can be subpoenaed into court. Extremely important. That's a basic record. In your book, it talks about a crime scene diagram. Yes, you're going to do a crime scene diagram. You're going to sketch it out. I'm not going to test you on all these different ways you sketch out a crime scene. I'll let you decide how you want to do that. But go in and read in the book, because there's some really interesting ways and tips on how to describe how a crime scene is laid out. But many of those things that you write in the field notes, you'll keep, you'll document, have an event number. It'll be given to the district attorney. And it's very, very helpful when 6 months later you're called onto the stand and you're asked by a defense attorney, Detective Swanson, can you tell me why you did this? And you can ask, I need to refresh my memory. Can I look at my notes? And of course they will let you. You pull out your notes, and looking at your notes, if you did them right, you can then say, okay, this is why I did that. Field notes, extremely important. Remember, be very, very descriptive when you're talking about a suspect, especially when we're doing an ATL. If you don't have enough information about a suspect, then don't even bother with an ATL. We're not trying to stop everybody within a neighborhood. Especially, don't use this as an excuse to do any kind of racial profiling. If you don't have specific suspect description, then don't put it out there. At this point, we're going to be looking for physical evidence. You're going to be documenting physical evidence in that crime scene. Meaning, what is it that I'm going to be picking up, and what is it that I'm going to be using to try and prove my case in court? And we'll get to this in detail in the next chapters after this. Right now, just understand that you're going to be documenting on everything that you pick up and you place into evidence. Management notification, extremely important. Detectives generally are not management. What I mean by that is, who do we notify? The chief of police? Do we notify a captain? Everybody or every department's going to have specific things in place. But most departments have what we call a PIO. Don't you love all these letters that we're using? And I love to put these as test questions. PIO. This is the person, this is the public information officer. In most jurisdictions, we don't want detectives to be talking in front of cameras. We definitely don't want police officers to be talking on cameras. The news are going to show up. News always show up. That's what they do. But most departments have somebody that's a public information officer. That officer, it's their job. They know how to direct things towards the news. So they'll show up, ask the detectives question. They're not going to contaminate your crime scene. They know better. They're not going to walk in, but they're going to be out there. They're going to say, come out here and explain to me what we have, because I need to give details to the news. Let the PIO talk to the news cameras. In many cases, the PIO is very good at asking the media for help. You've seen it yourself many times. How many times have you heard the law enforcement is needing assistance from the public to find this person, this car? And that's what the PIO does. So remember, person in charge, if I ask you that, it's the first responding officer on the scene is in charge of that crime scene till they've been relieved of duty by a supervisor or by the detective. In most cases, the detective will be that supervisor. Couple of things I want to mention to you when you're looking at a crime scene, and I get asked this question a lot. When you're looking at a crime scene, and we'll get to this later when we talk about specific crimes, you're not going to know in that crime scene what is unusual. Remember, inductive reasoning is all about what's unusual, what doesn't look right, Sesame Street, what doesn't look like everything else. You're not going to know that in most instances because you don't live there. Not your building, not your house, not this room. You need to get somebody that knows this. After you've secured the crime scene, have someone come in that is familiar with this area and have them tell you what doesn't fit here, what doesn't look right. Clearly, if tables and chairs are toppled over, you're going to say, okay, that looks unusual. Clearly, there was a fight in here. But there might be things inside of your crime scene that should not be there, and you would not know that unless somebody points it out. You're going to be looking for things that are disarranged, that are damaged, things that just don't look right. And we're going to talk about it, and you're going to photograph. And that's what's extremely important. Even though I told you I'm not going to test you on photographing a crime scene, we do that. We do it extensively. But you photograph what you see. Understand, what you see right now is what we photograph. We don't change anything. We're going to talk about that at the end, but you're going to photograph, the minute I walked in, this is what I see. You're going to conduct a final survey after you take all the evidence in. And you're going to be looking to make sure that you didn't leave anything behind the scene. But before we leave this topic of a crime scene, the book doesn't really go on to things that you shouldn't do. So I like to say this is Swanson's 4 things that you should not do in a crime scene. It's very important, and I'm saying these things because I've watched them over many years, people do them. So 4 things, and they are good test questions. Number 1, if you're that detective in the crime scene, I don't want you to use the bathroom. If you got to take a leak or you got to shit, you save it, you go to the 7-Eleven down the street or the Maverick. Do not use the bathroom.